Billionaire husband faced public humiliation as his pregnant wife exposed him and his mistress at work. Brace yourself for the untold story of a marriage drenched in luxury and lies. Genevieve Lockhart believed she had it all, an adoring husband, Alexander, whose billion-dollar empire spanned continents, a fairy tale wedding that glowed across glossy magazines, and a life of indulgence, charity galas and private jets. But beneath the polished facade lurked treachery and betrayal, culminating in the explosive moment she caught Alexander with his mistress right in his own corporate fortress. In this dramatic saga of power, obsession, and revenge, discover how Genevieve's rage unleashes a tidal wave of shocking truths, forever altering the fate of everyone involved. Genevieve Marshall was not born into wealth, but from a young age she possessed an uncanny resilience. Growing up in a modest home in Westbridge Hills, she learned to value tenacity and hard work. At 22, she graduated top of her class in international business, determined to build her own future. When she landed an internship at Lockhart Global, a multinational conglomerate known for its ventures in real estate, technology, and entertainment, she believed it was a gateway to success. Her first encounter with Alexander Lockhart was the stuff of storybooks. He arrived at the Westbridge Hills office unannounced, and everyone scrambled to accommodate their young, visionary CEO. Alexander, barely 30, had inherited Lockhart Global from his late father, but had expanded it exponentially through shrewd investments and cunning negotiations. His magnetic smile, impeccably tailored suit, and effortless confidence made him the center of attention wherever he went. What started as a professional admiration soon blossomed into something more. Alexander singled Genevieve out for special projects, praising her diligence. Late-night brainstorming sessions morphed into intimate conversations. Within months, he invited her to an exclusive business summit in Monaco, and one starlit evening on the deck of a yacht, he proposed. She said yes, her heart soaring. From the moment Genevieve accepted Alexander's proposal, she was whisked into a whirlwind of opulence. Their engagement made headlines, with tabloids dubbing them the new power couple. Alexander's proposal came with a 7-carat diamond ring, said to be a Lockhart family heirloom that once belonged to his grandmother. The wedding was a spectacle, an extravagant ceremony at Lake Como, replete with live orchestras, floating lanterns, and international dignitaries. Genevieve found herself at charity galas, board meetings, and private soirees attended by politicians, celebrities, and the global elite. She quickly adjusted to a life that included traveling via private jets, wearing haute couture gowns, and dining at Michelin-starred restaurants. Though initially overwhelmed, Genevieve discovered she possessed a natural grace for hosting philanthropic events and representing Lockhart Global as its elegant first lady. Behind the glamorous facade, Alexander's thirst for expansion never waned. Some marveled at how he balanced business with an active social life. Others warned Genevieve that he often burned the candle at both ends. But she was too smitten to notice potential red flags. After all, he was kind, charming, and lauded for his devotion. If he disappeared for a last-minute deal or flew to Tokyo at a moment's notice, she trusted it was just business. The first sign that not all was well arrived in the form of hushed whispers at a Lockhart Global cocktail event. Clutching her champagne flute, Genevieve overheard 2 junior associates discussing a secret rumor about Alexander's late-night office activities. She approached them only to witness their startled expressions and abrupt silence. Though they politely brushed off her concern, her intuition prickled. Around the same time, Alexander's old friend, David Harrington, a finance mogul in his own right, approached her during a gala at the Luxmore Hotel. He made small talk about business, then lowered his voice in warning. "Alexander's changed," David said. "He's always been relentless in business, but lately, he's different." "Just keep your eyes open, Genevieve." She spent that evening pondering David's cryptic comment. Alexander's ambitious nature was part of what she loved about him. But as the weeks wore on, he grew more secretive. He would take hushed phone calls in corners of their penthouse, claiming them to be sensitive negotiations. He'd leave for extended business dinners she wasn't invited to, and though he maintained a polished exterior, a flicker of unease flashed in his eyes whenever she asked too many questions. Genevieve first heard Cassandra Delgado's name during a corporate luncheon at Lockhart Tower. She was speaking with Mark Yates, the head of human resources, when he casually mentioned that Cassandra Delgado was fast becoming one of the company's biggest assets. "She's practically a wizard at corporate strategy," Mark explained. "Alexander's entrusted her with major expansions in Asia and the Middle East." A quiet uneasiness snaked through Genevieve. It wasn't that Alexander had never worked closely with other female executives. He prided himself on diversity at Lockhart Global. But there was something in Mark's tone, an odd mix of admiration and wariness, that piqued her curiosity. That afternoon, she tried to meet Cassandra Delgado to see for herself what made the woman so exceptional. Cassandra was out of the office, ironically traveling for business with Alexander. According to the assistant's quick explanation, Genevieve forced a smile, but her heart pounded. She remembered the nights Alexander claimed to be traveling alone on urgent business deals. Could Cassandra have been with him? Her instincts flared, though she tried to quash them. After all, this was Lockhart Global. People traveled for deals all the time. Still, Genevieve couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to keep her ear to the ground. It wasn't long before Genevieve's suspicions took root. At a charity function for Redwood Children's Hospital, she found herself standing beside Alexander, greeting donors and taking photographs. Across the ballroom, she noticed a strikingly beautiful woman with dark hair in a sleek chignon, wearing a crimson evening gown. She glanced at Alexander, whose normally composed expression flickered with what looked like recognition, perhaps even alarm, when he spotted the same woman. Genevieve excused herself and slipped into the crowd to investigate. As she circled the room, she caught glimpses of the woman exchanging knowing smiles with Alexander from across the hall. Their covert glances were obvious to a wife whose senses had been heightened by doubt. Finally, Genevieve mustered the courage to approach. "You must be Mrs. Lockhart," the woman said smoothly, extending a hand. "I'm Cassandra Delgado. We haven't officially met, but I'm on the global expansions team for Lockhart Global." Genevieve forced her most gracious smile while her insides churned. Cassandra's voice dripped with confidence. The way she held Alexander's gaze lingering, intimate, planted an icy knot in Genevieve's stomach. Alexander quickly joined them, placing a possessive hand on Genevieve's waist, as if to ward off any suspicion. The tension was palpable, but no one said a word. In the following weeks, Alexander's schedule became busier than ever. He claimed to be refining a major contract for the company's expansion into Dubai, an opportunity that, if successful, could catapult Lockhart Global into stratospheric growth. But the phone calls, the hushed texts, and the hurried departures at all hours left Genevieve reeling. One night, Genevieve woke at 2 a.m. to find Alexander's side of the bed empty. She found him in his study, the door slightly ajar, whispering into his phone in a low, urgent tone. Before she could speak, she heard him say, "I can't talk now, she's awake," and abruptly end the call. When she confronted him, he insisted it was a complicated international deal requiring delicate timing. His expression was the picture of apologetic sincerity, yet she couldn't ignore the shallow explanations. The following morning, she discovered a second smartphone in his briefcase while retrieving a file. The device, locked with a passcode, had a golden case and the initials CD etched into the interior. Stunned, she quietly returned it to the briefcase without a word. That moment sealed her suspicions. Genevieve resolved that if Alexander wouldn't be honest, she would uncover the truth herself. Desperate for someone to confide in, Genevieve sought out her closest friend and personal assistant, Priya Arora, who had worked with the Lockhart family for 3 years. Loyal and perceptive, Priya had often noticed the unspoken tensions that simmered beneath the surface. Over coffee in Genevieve's private lounge, she listened with concern as Genevieve recounted the eerie phone calls and the mysterious second phone. Priya shared her own observations. She had seen Cassandra visit Alexander's private office multiple times after official hours, always departing with an intimate familiarity, her coat draped over her arm, her hair slightly tousled. The staff suspected something but remained tight-lipped. After all, Alexander Lockhart was not merely an employer, he was a titan. "Do you have any proof?" Priya asked gently. "A suspicion alone won't help if he denies everything." Genevieve nodded, drawing a trembling breath. "I need someone skilled, a private investigator who can gather concrete evidence. I'm not proud to resort to this, but I have to know." Priya gave her a card. "I've heard whispers about a discreet pie named Robert Farnsworth. He specializes in high-profile cases, but be cautious. Once you open this door, there's no going back." Genevieve took the card and stared at it, steeling herself. Robert Farnsworth, a former intelligence officer, accepted the case with his characteristic calm professionalism. Meeting Genevieve in a dimly lit cafe far from Lockhart Tower, he listened as she explained the suspicious activities surrounding Alexander and Cassandra Delgado. He assured her discretion. "You won't hear from me until I have something substantial," he said. A few days later, Farnsworth discreetly installed tracking software on Alexander's official company car, monitored his publicly available flight records, and stationed an operative near Lockhart Tower to observe after-hours activities. He also made contact with an old friend in the Lockhart department, quietly requesting logs of email correspondences between Alexander and Cassandra. True to his word, Farnsworth delivered weekly updates. Mr. Lockhart and Miss Delgado left the office at 10:42 p.m. On Wednesday, read one message, arriving at La Brise Hotel 15 minutes later. She left the hotel alone at 1:30 a.m. The next day, Farnsworth provided photos. Cassandra, stepping out of Alexander's sleek black SUV, hair and makeup barely disheveled, a heated look of satisfaction in her eyes. Each photograph was a dagger in Genevieve's heart. It wasn't just one slip, it was an ongoing, blatant affair. Yet she waited, she needed the perfect moment to act. While Farnsworth gathered evidence, Genevieve's days grew increasingly agonizing. She played the role of the devoted wife in public, smiling at board luncheons, hosting charity auctions, and graciously greeting dignitaries at Lockhart events. But behind the scenes, she was crumbling. Every time Alexander brushed a kiss on her cheek, she wondered if he still tasted of Cassandra's perfume. Genevieve's only solace was the support of Priya and a small circle of friends who sensed her pain. Catherine Westwood, an influential philanthropist and longtime mentor, approached her during a fundraiser. "You look tired, my dear," Catherine observed softly. "Remember, even queens need rest." Genevieve forced a smile, aware that Catherine saw more than she let on. Torn between heartbreak and fury, Genevieve grappled with how to confront Alexander. Part of her wanted to preserve the marriage, or at least salvage the illusions built around it. But with each new piece of evidence, Farnsworth supplied a dinner reservation under false names. A secret flight to a Singapore conference. It became clear that Alexander was far from remorseful. Tension crept into their private conversations. Alexander grew defensive about routine questions. Genevieve found herself biting back sarcastic remarks every time he claimed to be busy at the office. One late evening, Genevieve built up the courage to address the growing chasm. Alexander was in his study, engrossed in what he claimed to be an urgent contract with a Dubai investor. The air felt stifled, so thick with secrets and fear that Genevieve had to remind herself to breathe. "I want to talk," she declared, her voice unexpectedly calm. "We haven't had a proper conversation in weeks." Alexander looked up, tired lines marking his face. "I know," he sighed. "I'm sorry, Genevieve. The expansion, it's taking everything I have." She approached, watching him carefully. "Is there something else? Something you're not telling me?" He avoided her gaze, shuffling papers. "It's just work. You know me. I want to make sure we're set for life." She resisted the urge to slap the damning photos on his desk. She yearned to fling accusations, demanding that he name Cassandra outright. But a small part of her hoped for an honest confession. When none arrived, she simply nodded, feigning acceptance. She sensed that, if she moved too soon, he would deny everything and bury it deeper. Patience, she reminded herself. Farnsworth was close to uncovering more. When the confrontation happened, it would be on her terms. Several days later, Farnsworth's text arrived at dawn. "You'll want to see this. It's conclusive." Genevieve felt her stomach lurch. By midday, she met him at a discreet location, a storage unit he used for private client meetings. There, under the flickering fluorescent light, Farnsworth showed her the final nail in the coffin, security camera footage from Lockhart Tower's 48th floor, recorded after midnight. The footage was grainy yet unmistakable. Alexander and Cassandra stepping off a private elevator, entwined in each other's arms, disappearing into the executive suite. They emerged 2 hours later, Cassandra adjusting her blouse, Alexander smoothing his hair. Farnsworth had also uncovered a chain of emails between the two, referencing after-hours strategy sessions in a tone that was far from professional. Genevieve felt a mixture of devastation and dark satisfaction. There could be no more excuses, no more illusions. The breadth of Alexander's betrayal was undeniable. "I have to confront him," she whispered, blinking back tears. Farnsworth nodded. "It's solid evidence. Enough to confirm everything to the board of Lockhart Global, if you choose." Genevieve inhaled sharply, a spark of determination lighting her eyes. "He's disrespected me in our home, in his workplace, everywhere. I'll bring this to light where it hurts him most, Lockhart Tower." Genevieve was done playing the quiet, demure wife. Over the next few days, she carefully orchestrated a plan to expose Alexander's affair with Cassandra, not just to him, but in front of critical Lockhart Global stakeholders. A major corporate unveiling was scheduled, a glitzy event in which Alexander would announce a new initiative in sustainable energy. Top investors, board members, and high-level executives, including Cassandra, were all set to attend. Genevieve reached out to Catherine Westwood, who knew many of the board members personally. In hushed tones, Genevieve intimated that something monumental would happen at the event. Catherine, though visibly concerned, agreed to help ensure that the right audience was present. Priya, for her part, wrangled the PR department and made sure Genevieve would be given a few minutes on stage under the guise of discussing new philanthropic partnerships. Genevieve painstakingly rehearsed her speech, deciding exactly how and when to deploy Farnsworth's footage. She wanted no confusion, no room for Alexander or Cassandra to spin the narrative. Every detail was calibrated. Genevieve's heart thudded with fear and adrenaline, but she stood firm. If her husband thought he could flaunt his betrayal in the halls of power, she would bring down the walls around him in those same halls. The night of the grand unveiling arrived, and the Lockhart Tower was transformed into a spectacle of modern glamour. Attendees walked across a red carpet into the swanky lobby, guided by uniformed ushers to the 50th floor ballroom. Chandeliers sparkled like constellations, and champagne flowed freely as jazz music played in the background. Genevieve arrived wearing a breathtaking midnight blue gown that accentuated her poised stature. She flashed a calm smile at the press photographers, her emotions buried beneath an exterior of practiced elegance. Alexander, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, stood by her side as they posed for pictures. To outsiders, they looked like the ultimate power couple. Inwardly, Genevieve braced for the final blow. Across the ballroom, Cassandra Delgado circulated among the executives, her figure draped in a fiery red ensemble that drew eyes from every corner. She exuded confidence, unaware that tonight's events might sabotage her carefully crafted aspirations. At precisely 8 o'clock, the overhead lights dimmed, and a spotlight illuminated the stage. Alexander took the podium, delivering a polished speech about Lockhart Global's foray into sustainable energy. Once he concluded, polite applause filled the room. A stage assistant then announced, "And now we'd like to welcome Miss S. Genevieve Lockhart for a special address." Genevieve ascended the stage, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. The crowd's applause was warm. She was, after all, admired as the philanthropic face of the Lockhart brand. She began her speech with the usual pleasantries, thanking donors and expressing excitement for the company's future. Then her tone shifted. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of nerves and conviction, "I've always believed in the vision of Lockhart Global integrity, innovation, and leadership. Unfortunately, I've come across information that betrays those very values, and I can no longer remain silent." A ripple of murmurs traveled through the audience. Cassandra, standing near the front, narrowed her eyes. Alexander stiffened, a flicker of alarm crossing his face. Genevieve signaled the AV technician, whom Priya had quietly briefed earlier. The projector came alive behind her, displaying a series of incriminating emails between Alexander and Cassandra, discussing late-night meetings, romantic rendezvous, and personal details that left no room for innocent interpretation. Then came the photographs, them entering hotels, leaving private suites, riding together in the middle of the night. Gasps erupted. Alexander stormed toward the stage. Cassandra looked stunned, her face drained of all color. Genevieve's heartbeat thundered, but she held her ground. Alexander reached the stage steps, his voice low but laced with panic. "Genevieve, we need to talk privately. This is insane. Take this down now." Behind him, the audience was in an uproar, with flashing camera phones capturing every moment. Genevieve refused to yield. "For too long, I've been humiliated in private. If the scandal is out, it should be the truth, not some rumor you spin," she said, her words amplified by the microphone. She turned to face him, her eyes blazing. "You broke our vows in your office, in our home, and with our money. Tonight, I'm exposing your betrayal under the same lights you used to celebrate our marriage." Cassandra's expression contorted between shock and anger. She attempted to push through the crowd, but security guards, anticipating mayhem, blocked her path. The hush that descended on the room was electric. Everyone waited to see what Alexander would do. He raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Genevieve, please, I can explain." His voice cracked. No rehearsed speech or corporate spin could salvage him now. Genevieve squared her shoulders. "There's nothing left to explain. You've disgraced me and this company." And with that, she turned away, leaving him visibly shaken. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Reporters who had been invited for the official unveiling rushed forward, clamoring for statements. Social media influencers live-streamed the spectacle, fueling a viral storm. Investors, including the formidable Catherine Westwood, exchanged horrified glances, some openly outraged, others retreating to corners to make frantic phone calls. Cassandra wrestled past security, tears of fury staining her cheeks. "You set me up," she hissed at Genevieve, though the microphone still captured snippets of her words. "Alexander and I, this was between us. How dare you do this in public?" Genevieve met her glare, feeling an odd surge of confidence. "You already did it in public," she said, her voice cold. "I'm simply letting the world see it." Nearby, Alexander tried to intervene, but investors surrounded him, demanding answers. "What about our partnership in Dubai?" one yelled. "Was that just a front for your affair?" Alexander's voice shook. "I never intended. Listen, it's complicated. We can salvage the contract. This has nothing to do with the business." But the damage was done. The illusions of trust and respect shattered across the marbled floor. In the space of minutes, Alexander's carefully curated image disintegrated, replaced by an unsalvageable scandal. Amid the media frenzy, Genevieve slipped out a side door escorted by Priya. She felt numb, a strange cocktail of triumph and sorrow swirling inside her. In the limo ride back to the Lockhart penthouse, she stared out the window at the city lights, her mind replaying the stunned expressions of everyone at the event. She knew her actions were drastic, but no part of her regretted them. When they arrived, Priya tried to offer comforting words. "You did what you had to. You were honest about his betrayal, even if it was brutal." Genevieve's throat felt tight. She recalled the early days, the gentle way Alexander had courted her, the vows they exchanged by a moonlit lake in Italy. "I can't believe this is who he's become," she murmured. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. She would not let herself crumble, at least not yet. Priya poured her a stiff drink, and Genevieve sipped it gratefully. She knew the war wasn't over. Alexander would come home, or possibly not, and she had to decide what came next. For the moment, she allowed herself the solace of a silent penthouse, a far cry from the glitz and drama she'd just unleashed. It was nearly dawn when Alexander finally returned. He looked like a ghost of his former self, tie undone, hair disheveled, eyes red with exhaustion. The instant Genevieve saw him, all her pent-up rage and hurt flared. She stood in the foyer, arms folded. "Your phone's been ringing non-stop," she said flatly. "Investors, the press, the board. It seems everyone wants to know what happened." Alexander dropped his keys on a console, letting out a shuddering sigh. "Genevieve, let's talk calmly." "You want calm?" she snapped, her voice breaking. "I gave you calm every day you lied to me, every night you slept with her." He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I never meant don't." She raised her hand, tears burning behind her lids. "I'm done with your apologies. The damage is done." For a moment, he looked truly remorseful, or perhaps just cornered. "Let's figure this out. We can handle the board. I'll end things with Cassandra. We can patch our marriage." She let out a humorless laugh. "You think I exposed you in front of the world to fix this marriage?" "No, Alexander. This is the end." She turned and marched away, leaving him alone in the foyer with his guilt. The day after the cataclysmic gala, the board of Lockhart Global convened in an emergency session. Investor confidence had plummeted overnight. Stock prices dipped amid swirling rumors of corporate instability and leadership misconduct. Catherine Westwood led the charge, demanding immediate accountability. Alexander arrived at the boardroom to a frosty reception. Though he tried to defend himself, citing personal indiscretion as separate from corporate governance, the board wouldn't easily be placated. "You used company resources for your affair," Catherine asserted, referencing Farnsworth's evidence. "Hotel suites charged to corporate cards. Flights disguised as business trips. This is unethical and could be legally damaging." Several board members, incensed, proposed an immediate removal of Alexander as CEO. Another faction suggested a temporary leave of absence while an internal investigation commenced. Alexander, pale-faced and humiliated, tried to salvage his position. But the severity of the scandal was undeniable. Meanwhile, Cassandra Delgado was nowhere to be found. Rumors swirled that she had flown to Europe to escape the media glare. Human resources froze her accounts and launched their own inquiries. In less than 24 hours, the unstoppable empire of Alexander Lockhart was teetering on the brink, undone by the very hubris that once built it. The scandal dominated news cycles. The hashtag Lockhart lies trended on social media, with tabloids publishing conspiratorial timelines of the affair. Business channels speculated on how the fiasco might affect global markets, while gossip columns dished on the personal drama. Paparazzi camped outside the Lockhart penthouse, hoping to catch a glimpse of Genevieve or Alexander. Initially, Genevieve stayed inside, stunned by the global attention. Then she received a phone call from a well-known journalist, Meredith Brooks, requesting an exclusive interview. Genevieve hesitated. She despised public spectacle. But she realized telling her story could be a strategic move to protect herself and possibly reassert her identity beyond scorned wife. When the day of the interview arrived, Genevieve found herself in a serene TV studio, lights softly illuminating the set. Meredith, known for her fair yet incisive style, asked probing questions about the affair, the corporate fallout, and Genevieve's personal anguish. Holding her composure, Genevieve spoke candidly about her heartbreak, her reasons for exposing Alexander publicly, and her hope for a more ethical corporate culture. The interview aired that evening. It elicited an outpouring of support from viewers who admired her courage. Yet the condemnation of Alexander grew fiercer, fueling an already blazing scandal. Over the following weeks, Genevieve took refuge in a smaller property owned by the Lockhart family, a quiet lakeside villa outside the city. There, she tried to piece her life back together. Old photographs reminded her of how quickly everything had changed. Her wide-eyed excitement when first joining Lockhart Global, her wedding day with a radiant Alexander gazing at her with what she believed was genuine adoration. Now, each memory felt tainted. Yet amidst the heartbreak, she realized she still had her intellect, her network, and her resilience. Friends like Priya visited often, delivering company updates and moral support. Catherine Westwood called regularly, urging Genevieve to remain strong amid negotiations with the board regarding Alexander's fate. Sometimes, Genevieve's phone buzzed with unknown numbers. She'd grown wary, suspecting them to be journalists or even Cassandra herself, but one evening she picked up hesitantly, only to hear a trembling female voice. "It's me, Cassandra," the caller whispered, her tone almost apologetic. "I need to talk." Genevieve's pulse raced. Part of her wanted to hang up, but curiosity mingled with the desire for final closure. "Fine," she said quietly. "Tell me what you have to say." Little did she know how her next move would shift everything. Genevieve met Cassandra Delgado in a discreet cafe on the outskirts of Westbridge Hills. She arrived with guarded expectations, ready to defend herself against a tirade or half-baked justifications. Yet Cassandra looked uncharacteristically nervous, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her makeup minimal. "I'm not here to fight," Cassandra began softly, fiddling with her coffee cup. "What happened? It's my fault too. I should have known better. But Alexander made promises about my career, about a life with him if I proved my loyalty." Genevieve remained silent, letting Cassandra's words unravel. She discovered that their affair had begun almost a year ago, fueled by late nights and a mutual ambition. Cassandra admitted she fell for Alexander's visions of grandeur, believing he'd eventually leave Genevieve. "I realize how foolish I was," she said, her eyes moist with regret. Sipping her tea, Genevieve allowed a pause. She felt no sympathy for the woman who aided in dismantling her marriage, but she recognized Cassandra's sincerity. "Why tell me this now?" she asked at last. Cassandra handed her a thick envelope. Inside was further evidence of Alexander's questionable corporate dealings documents that could sway the board's final decision on his future. "I guess I've been burned enough," Cassandra murmured, tears glinting. "He used me. I can't protect him anymore." Armed with Cassandra's documents, emails detailing dubious offshore accounts, hush money transactions, and questionable contracts, Genevieve returned to the city. A special session of the board was scheduled to determine Alexander's fate. She decided to attend, not as a passive observer, but as a key voice in the company's leadership struggle. The boardroom was silent when she entered. At the head of the table sat Catherine Westwood, flanked by stern-faced directors. Alexander, looking pallid and defeated, occupied a seat opposite the door. He barely met Genevieve's gaze. She spoke calmly, handing out copies of the documents. "This affair isn't just a personal betrayal," she announced. "Alexander has risked the company's credibility by mixing personal indiscretions with corporate assets. The evidence here shows even deeper violations." As the board members skimmed the pages, murmured exclamations rippled around the table. Alexander's face flushed with anger. "You're going to destroy everything I built," he hissed, glaring at Genevieve. She met his glare without flinching. "You destroyed it yourself. I'm merely revealing what's hidden." Catherine tapped her pen against the table. "These documents confirm we have cause for immediate removal of Alexander Lockhart as CEO. The board can vote on the motion today." Genevieve exhaled. The final showdown was at hand. Despite Alexander's attempts to justify his actions, claiming any offshore accounts were for tax efficiency and hush money payments were settlements to avoid frivolous lawsuits, the board was unimpressed. Even members once loyal to him realized the risk of standing by a leader who had publicly shamed the company and might face legal repercussions. The vote was swift, unanimous removal of Alexander Lockhart from the CEO position. An interim CEO, former cool Melinda Rogers, was appointed to stabilize the firm and reassure investors. Catherine Westwood sat back in her chair, relief mingling with sorrow. The Lockhart name, once synonymous with unstoppable success, was now emblematic of scandal. Alexander marched out of the boardroom, refusing to look at Genevieve. As he passed, she could sense the bitterness radiating from him, a man accustomed to total control, suddenly cast aside. Part of her felt pity, recalling the ambition and charisma that once enchanted her. But she reminded herself of the evidence, the heartbreak, and his blatant deceit. In the hallway, Priya quietly approached Genevieve. "Are you okay?" Genevieve wiped away a single tear. "I will be," she whispered, glimpsing through the glass doors as Alexander disappeared from the building, an empire lost in his wake. With Alexander ousted, Genevieve confronted the messy reality of divorce and the public scrutiny that still clung to her name. She retained respected attorney Josephine Reed, who specialized in high-profile separations. Together, they navigated the complexities of asset division, prenuptial clauses, and possible reputational damages. Outside the office, Genevieve's phone buzzed with messages of both support and curiosity. Friends voiced solidarity, while the media demanded more interviews. She refrained from fueling the frenzy. She had said her piece. Instead, she focused on establishing a new normal. Lockhart Global moved forward under Melinda Rogers, who reached out to Genevieve, hoping to retain her philanthropic involvement. Despite the turmoil, Genevieve felt indebted to the employees who had been loyal. She agreed to stay on as an advisor to Lockhart's charitable arm. Maybe it was her penance for having turned a blind eye to Alexander's actions for so long. On a more personal note, she confronted her feelings about Cassandra. Sharing evidence with Genevieve didn't erase her role in the affair, but it was, perhaps, a step toward accountability. While Genevieve wasn't ready to forgive, she realized the complexity of the situation. Two driven women, manipulated by the same charismatic man, neither escaped unscathed. Weeks turned into months as the scandal's fervor gradually subsided. The tabloids, ever hungry, moved on to fresh controversies. Genevieve used the time to travel, visiting Redwood Spa Retreat in the mountains to find solitude and reflect on her next steps. She left her phone behind, trusting Priya to handle urgent matters. In the quiet stillness of nature, Genevieve felt an unexpected lightness. Freed from the constant scrutiny of her marriage, she rediscovered her own ambitions. She wanted to start a foundation focusing on women's entrepreneurship. That dream had once been overshadowed by Lockhart Global's philanthropic events, which always bore Alexander's name. She spent mornings hiking forest trails, forging a sense of self she'd long missed. One afternoon, she finally allowed herself to cry, not just from betrayal, but for the young woman she was, so eager to trust and love. By evening, she wrote in her journal, planning a future that was hers alone. Returning to the city, she contacted Catherine Westwood to discuss potential investors. "I'm proud of you," Catherine replied over the phone. "You might have lost a husband, but you've gained your freedom and a renewed sense of purpose." Genevieve realized she felt lighter, if still tender, from the trauma. A new chapter was on the horizon. One day, Genevieve received a call from Alexander's lawyer, proposing a final mediation to settle the divorce. The meeting took place at a neutral law office downtown, with Josephine Reed by Genevieve's side. Alexander sat across the table, looking thinner, his once dazzling confidence visibly diminished. Formalities were exchanged, documents reviewed, the lawyers debated over properties, stocks, and intellectual rights. Alexander insisted on retaining certain assets, while Genevieve wanted financial independence. It was tense, but eventually an agreement began to take shape. During a break, Alexander approached Genevieve in the corridor, away from their attorneys. "I know I hurt you," he said quietly. "I'd do anything to rewind time. Will you ever forgive me?" She studied him, recalling their early days, the adoration, the synergy, the big dreams. "I don't know," she whispered. "What you did was destructive. You betrayed me, and you betrayed yourself." He dipped his head, tears glistening in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Genevieve." She nodded, not trusting her own voice. But inside, she felt the faint stirrings of closure. The conversation ended without a grand reconciliation, merely a resignation that their paths had diverged, perhaps irreparably. By the day's end, the divorce agreement was nearly final. Both parted, aware that their lives would never intersect the same way again. Meanwhile, Cassandra Delgado attempted to resurrect her career. She found no allies left at Lockhart Global. Her name was too closely tied to the scandal. Rumors followed her wherever she went, labeling her the Mistress who nearly toppled a billion-dollar empire. Desperate, she sought new opportunities abroad, leveraging her strategic expertise. Through a mutual acquaintance, she secured an interview in London for a senior consultant position. But the background checks revealed her involvement in the Lockhart fiasco, raising serious concerns about her professional ethics. Frustrated and alone, Cassandra reached out to Genevieve once more, this time via a hesitant email. She apologized, yet again, acknowledging her mistakes and the pain she caused. She also thanked Genevieve for her unexpected compassion during their brief conversation at the cafe. "I never wanted my career to be defined by a scandal. I just wanted to succeed," she wrote. Genevieve read the email and sighed. She felt the bitterness, but also recognized a woman whose ambitions had led her astray. Though she didn't respond immediately, part of her hoped Cassandra could rebuild her life with more integrity. Everyone deserved a chance to learn from their mistakes, even if that chance came with scars. In the turbulent weeks following Alexander's downfall, Lockhart Global faced a reckoning it could no longer evade. Shareholders clamored for transparency, investors demanded ethics reforms, and employees yearned for stability. Into this fray stepped Melinda Rogers, the new interim CEO, whose steady leadership helped calm the storm. With unwavering resolve, she instituted a series of immediate changes, mandating ethics training at every level, commissioning a thorough audit of financial records, and creating a hotline to encourage whistleblowing without fear of retaliation. Although the company's name was tarnished, Melinda believed Lockhart Global still held enough promise to be rehabilitated. The board rallied behind her, publicly affirming a commitment to renewed corporate integrity. To that end, they used the scandal itself as a catalyst for sweeping reforms, determined to distance Lockhart Global from the toxic culture Alexander's actions had implied. Employees, initially wary, began regaining trust as they saw tangible efforts toward transparency. Meanwhile, Genevieve watched these developments with a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. She might have divorced Alexander, but she still felt a deep sense of responsibility toward the institution she had once championed so passionately. To her surprise, the board approached her about the future of the company's philanthropic initiatives. The Lockhart Global Charitable Division, previously under Alexander's oversight, required a fresh start. A plan emerged to separate it entirely from Lockhart Global, creating an independent foundation with a new name and a broader, more inclusive mission. Catherine Westwood stepped in to co-chair, and with her extensive network, she quickly garnered support for the venture. Genevieve and Catherine decided to call it the Marshall Westwood Foundation, blending Genevieve's maiden name with Catherine's, symbolizing unity and forward thinking. Their vision extended beyond the typical grants and galas. They aimed to fund women-led startups, combat workplace exploitation, and promote fair business practices on a global scale. After all, they had seen firsthand how power imbalances could foster corruption and betrayal. On the Foundation's official launch day, Genevieve stood at a small podium in a bustling co-working space filled with visionary entrepreneurs, supportive investors, and curious reporters. Despite the modest setting, excitement crackled in the air. She unveiled the Foundation's guiding principles: ethical innovation, inclusivity, and resilience, and emphasized how her own journey underscored the need for corporate leaders with strong moral compasses. When pressed about Alexander's scandal, Genevieve responded with gracious composure: "The past cannot be changed, but the future is ours to shape." This foundation represents more than just my personal transformation. It's a promise that success and integrity can and must coexist. Applause filled the space, and as Genevieve stepped back from the podium, she felt a new sense of purpose envelop her. In that moment, she was no longer shackled by the Lockhart name or haunted by Alexander's betrayal. She was Genevieve Marshall, once more reclaiming her legacy on her own terms. Genevieve awoke to the gentle glow of dawn, streaming through gauzy curtains in her lakeside villa. For a moment, she lay still, listening to the tranquil lap of water against the shore. She felt lighter than she had in years, no dread pooling in her stomach, no frantic urge to check her phone for hidden truths. The divorce papers had been signed, the final decisions made, and she was finally, unequivocally free. Slipping on a plush robe, she padded into the spacious living room and paused at the panoramic windows overlooking the lake. Mist clung to the water's surface, drifting like ghosts across the early morning light. Once, such a peaceful scene would have struck her as eerily still, a mocking contrast to her chaotic marriage. Today, however, the silence was a gift. It cradled her in the promise of fresh beginnings, a clean slate she had never dared to imagine. Her mind wandered through the events of the past months. Memories of Alexander still fluttered at the edges of her consciousness. Their early, blissful days, the quiet moments of genuine warmth. But each recollection felt oddly distant now, like flickers of a life she had read about rather than lived. The ache was softer. She carried no illusions about rewriting the past. Betrayal had irreversibly changed her. Yet, she was determined not to let that betrayal define the rest of her life. A gentle knock at the door broke her reverie. Priya, now the operations manager for the newly formed Marshall Westwood Foundation, entered with a bright smile and a binder in hand. "The mentorship program is taking off," she announced excitedly, flipping through pages of notes. "We've had an overwhelming response from young women wanting to start their own businesses. Funding applications are at an all-time high." Genevieve couldn't help but smile. She recalled the countless nights spent drafting the Foundation's mission statement, channeling her pain into something bigger than herself. Every success story, every woman who found her voice and launched her dream, felt like a personal victory. It was proof that light could break through even the darkest shadows. Over a breakfast of fresh fruit and warm pastries, Priya shared updates on the Foundation's upcoming gala. Genevieve would be the keynote speaker, her first major public appearance since the divorce was finalized. The prospect both thrilled and unsettled her, but she saw it as a chance to reclaim the narrative no longer as a scorned wife, but as a leader championing female empowerment and ethical leadership. After Priya left for the city, Genevieve took a moment to reflect on all that had changed. The platform, once monopolized by Alexander's ambition, was now reshaped into her own vehicle for positive impact. She had discovered a new sense of identity in fostering innovation and integrity among young entrepreneurs, particularly women who might otherwise be overlooked or underestimated. That afternoon, she strolled along the lake's edge, letting the pebbles crunch under her sandals. Her thoughts drifted from personal gratitude to larger ambitions for the Foundation. She envisioned expanding internationally, partnering with like-minded organizations, perhaps even initiating policy discussions that would safeguard against corporate abuses of power. She also considered writing a book, part memoir, part business manifesto, detailing her journey from wide-eyed intern to high-profile wife to empowered founder. It was a daunting idea, but one that excited her. As the sun asked higher, she paused to skim a stone across the water. Each gentle ripple reminded her of how a single action could send waves across an entire surface. Her choice to expose the truth about her marriage had been painful and dramatic, but ultimately necessary. And as it turned out, those ripples had paved the way for a future steeped in authenticity rather than secrecy. When she finally returned to the villa, the sun was warm on her face and a quiet confidence enveloped her heart. Genevieve knew there would be challenges ahead, skeptics, perhaps new betrayals and the lingering echoes of her past. But she also knew she possessed the fortitude to confront them. In that moment, she realized she wasn't merely free from Alexander's shadows. She was free to chart her own path. She was Genevieve Marshall, resilient, driven and alive with possibility. And for the first time in a long while, her future felt as expansive and promising as the shimmering lake stretched out before her. This riveting story of Genevieve and Alexander Lockhart reveals the dark consequences of unchecked ambition and deception. What began as a fairy tale romance soon spiraled into heartbreak when secrets, hushed phone calls, and clandestine encounters came crashing into the public eye. Betrayal not only shattered Genevieve's innocence, but also threatened the very foundation of Lockhart Global. Yet from the ruins of her marriage, she found renewed purpose, harnessing her pain to champion ethical leadership and empower women forging their own paths in business. Genevieve's journey reminds us that resilience often emerges from our darkest hours. No matter how public or painful the fall, we can all rise again stronger, wiser, and with clearer vision for the future. If this story moved you, please hit like, share it with those who love dramatic, real-life fiction, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of triumph over adversity.